Wonders, what does the Labour Party think? Should we tag migrants?
Well, the only people you tag are criminals. So my understanding is that people who come into this country seeking asylum are not criminals. They're usually people fleeing persecution. And if there's a problem with people absconding, this is the first I've heard about it. And clearly the solution to that is actually to get on and process the asylum applications a lot quicker than is happening. I think this is just another gimmick that is not dealing with the root of the problem at all.
The Home Secretary is partly blaming the Labour Party for the problems with migration. She says that she's being foiled in her bid to deport people by lefty lawyers, many of them bankrolled by the Labour Party.
Well, you know, when this party's been in power for 13 years, to keep blaming the Labour Party and lefty lawyers for every failure of the government is really just quite pathetic, frankly. I think they ought to own this problem. It's clear that they haven't dealt with the issue of asylum seekers. The fact that we are spending £6 million a day on housing them when the application backlog is so huge is nothing other than a failure that they should absolutely own themselves. And to blame other people, I'm afraid, is symptomatic of a bankrupt government.
The other thing the government's announcing today are plans to give police greater powers to investigate lower-level crimes, so thefts, burglaries, etc. Is this something that the Labour Party would welcome? It seems common sense to many.
Well, yeah, again, 13 years into a Conservative government, we're now deciding that the police should investigate all crimes. I mean, I would have thought that was something that we would have all agreed was something that should have been happening anyway. It just strikes me as utterly bizarre that this is now becoming an issue. And I think, again, it's showing how much our public sector has been stripped back over the last 13 years and ground into the ground.
The Labour Party today is you're wanting to talk about a postcode lottery in cancer care. Of course, we know that a postcode lottery does exist for many different health complaints, doesn't it? Why do you think highlighting the fact that people with cancer suffer from this makes a difference?
Well, I think it's very important that we highlight this because obviously cancer is something that, if it's not caught early, can lead to far worse outcomes, including, of course, death. And the government actually scrapped their 2-week treatment target only last week. So we think it's a timely opportunity to actually highlight the fact that many people in parts of the country are not getting that vital treatment at the right time.
Well, the government said, they didn't say they scrapped the 2-week thing. They just said that they've simply brought a whole load of different regulations together and that it actually will make treatment more efficient. And it was something that was certainly brought in with cancer charities and also doctors as well. It wasn't just the government's idea.
Well, it always seems to be the way when there's a problem in the NHS. The first reaction from the government is that they decide to change and scrap targets. And look, we know that getting treatment for cancer at the earliest possible opportunity is absolutely vital to get the best outcome. So we think that a 2-week target is something that really needs to continue to have a focus.
Speaking to the media yesterday, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, said that Labour would not increase taxes on the most wealthy. This is the 45p rate of tax, of course, that has been much discussed. Momentum, who are an organisation to the left of the Labour Party, have said that this is absolutely shameful. What does the Labour Party stand for?
Well, the Labour Party stands for greater opportunity, equality, investment in public services, supporting our NHS. These are all things that a Labour government would hope to deliver. And look, I understand why people are concerned about what's being said in recent days, but we have to remind ourselves that we've already got the highest tax burden since the Second World War. We've had 12 to 18 months of absolute chaos from this government where they've been flip-flopping on tax policy. And it's really important that as a hopefully incoming government, we send a message of stability and certainty out there that actually we're not going to mess around with tax rates other than what we've already said. We're going to deal for specific policies. We need to create a sense of stability and calm so that businesses have the confidence to invest so we can get that level of growth that will actually help us deliver some of these policies that we want to see spreading out across the nation.
But your critics will say that stability and certainty is something that you can't expect from someone like Keir Starmer, because this is a man who promised that he would increase the 45p rate of income tax when he stood for party leadership. A number of those promises that he made when he stood for party leadership, he's already rode back on. How can the Labour Party say it's a party of stability if your leader keeps changing his mind on what you stand for?
Well, I don't think Keir's principles have changed. What's changed is the economic circumstances.
That's the same as your principles, isn't it?
Well, look, if you look at the 10 pledges that he made when he stood for leader, I believe at least 8 of those are still live. You could argue about.
So should we just believe 80% of what the Labour Party tell us?
Well, look, I think it's important to note that since those pledges were made, we've had a pandemic, we've had a war in Ukraine. Those have had massive impacts on the economy. And then, of course, we've had the shambles of the quasi-quartang Liz Truss budget last year, which is still wreaking havoc on the economy now. So the circumstances have changed. And if we stuck to exactly the pledges we'd made 3 years ago, you'd say, well, the world's changed. Why haven't you kept up with it? You would be criticising us for that as well.
Well, but because pledges are what goes to the heart of the party, isn't it?
Yes, and as I said, we've maintained 80% of those, and those that have changed are because the economic situation has changed. I think it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge that actually this country has had an awful lot of economic shocks in the last few years. One of those, at least, was implemented by an out-of-control government. And if we pretend that didn't happen, then you would just be saying we've not kept up with reality. So it's I'm afraid it's sad that we've had to do this, but it's a reflection of where we are as a country.
Another subject that there's been a big row about in the last few weeks is the ULEZ expansion zone in London. It cost Labour the Uxbridge by-election. There's now even reports of a pay-per-mile charge coming in for drivers in London. Do you think Labour can afford to lose votes in London? I mean, there is this donut of seats around central London that are going to be affected by the ULEZ congestion expansion. Can Labour really afford to lose those seats over this one issue?
Well, look, we're not looking to lose seats anywhere. We want to maximise our vote, get a good, strong majority so we can deliver on our priorities for the British people. In terms of that pay per mile story, Sadiq Khan's already said that's not going to happen. That's not Labour policy. In terms of ULEZ, we've asked him to think again on that. And look, we've got to remember as well that it was actually the Conservative government that asked him to deal with clean air and air pollution. I think everyone would agree that dealing with air pollution is an important issue. I think it's just that the impact it's had on people in what is a tough time economically is something that has caused us to ask him to think again about it. But if the Conservatives think they're going to win an election on ditching green policies, then I say bring it on, because I think they would be drawing entirely the wrong conclusion about what's right for this country and what the priorities of the British people are.
You've asked him to think again about it, but he's sticking to his guns. This shows a real schism in the Labour Party, doesn't it, between Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan?
Well, look, what it shows is that when someone is democratically elected by the people that they represent, they have the mandate, and he is entitled to continue to govern London in the way he sees fit. We're also entitled to say to him, we think he should think again and can reconsider some of his policies when it's having an effect on people. But we're not going to start imposing on local councils and mayors our view on the way the world works, because we actually want to go in the opposite direction. We want to give communities greater power and say over their own futures. We want them to take back control, and we've got a bill that will do that when we get into government.
Justin Matters, the Shadow Minister for Employment Rights. Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.